Back in October of 2024, I provided quite a lot of information that largely proves how Danish intelligence are using seemingly random Danish civilians as their proxies to act against me in all sorts of ways, clearly with the intent to manufacture or coerce cases against me, only so that the Danish government have something to come after me for. Now I have finally managed to get access to some more of this information that was being withheld from me back in October 2024 and earlier regarding this exact situation. Documentation which has been a nightmare to get the police to hand over, for obvious reasons. Before we analyse these new documents, I fear it necessary to explain my slight shift in perception in regard to the new Trump administration, in terms of what I have said in recent videos about it. While agreeing with the Trump administration on wanting peace in Ukraine and their positive stance of freedom of speech, I certainly also disagree with it on other key issues, for example Palestine, the technocratic agenda, not to mention US's treatment of Denmark over Greenland, which I vehemently disagreed with. You know, it is possible to give credit where credit is due and simultaneously hold critical views on other issues you disagree with. That is precisely what Vice President Vance was talking about in Munich to his European counterparts as being an integral part of true democracies. My positivity towards the Trump administration over Ukraine and freedom of speech, which may or may not be well founded, doesn't mean that I have flip-flopped or I'm not true to my words. It just means that I'm not bound by two-party politics. I have a much more pragmatic and realistic worldview, much more than most. I'm one of those few people who has been calling for peace in Ukraine way before it was popular, and for doing so, my own Danish government has been calling me a traitor, and their intelligence agencies have been labelling me as some kind of Russian asset on an industrial scale, so it's not surprising that I'm applauding Trump for his purported peace plans with the Russians, very much unlike the European elite who are calling for World War III essentially. Notwithstanding the before mentioned, whichever country and intelligence agency which is primarily responsible for the broadcasting of the propaganda narratives of the program are spinning all kinds of fantastical propaganda narratives on the basis of my slight shift in perception to the new Trump administration. All that is really necessary for me to say in response: I don't for a second believe that Trump is going to send Air Force One and fly me off to the United States where I will be able to live a free and normal life as a naturalized American citizen. As I have said many times before, this global social engineering experiment, and me being the so-called protagonist of it, is most likely going to continue endlessly. And when I am no longer of any use, or when it becomes too difficult to maintain people's indoctrinated perception of what is really going on, then they will most likely set me up to be imprisoned and or killed. This outcome is thousands times more likely than one I mentioned previous. And there is no amount of NLP brainwashing or the copious amounts of gaslighting that I'm receiving seemingly from everywhere that is ever going to change my grounded perception of reality. I may not be able to prove at this point that it is the US government that is ultimately responsible for everything in the program. I do, however, know for a fact that if Trump really wanted to put an end to this public persecution of me, Stephen Bell, with the use of all kinds of US advanced technologies and satellite systems, he could do so with a flick of a pen. Something that obviously hasn't happened as of yet, and I don't have high hopes that it ever will. Notwithstanding, I still want peace in Ukraine, and I don't want Denmark to be railroaded, for example, over Greenland, and that's despite how the Danish government and its intelligence agencies and a large portion of the population would rather see me hang than lending me a hand. Now that is all said and done, let's get back to further proving how the regular Danish police and its intelligence agency, PET, are using seemingly random members of the public as their de facto proxies to act against me in coordinated and malicious ways. As I showed in my first video from October of 2024 that intelligence here in Denmark were using the real-time synthetic telepathy communication system to encourage the people around me at the hunting licensing school, subjecting me to gaslighting and harassment with the intent to have me act out in response, only to deny what they were doing had I responded in kind. Because I'm well aware of the modus and carried myself accordingly did they fail in their many attempts. As is seemingly always the case with intelligence, when they fail they always tend to double down. So immediately after having gotten my hunting license in March of 2023, they immediately had people make anonymous reports of me to the police. One of these was on the 27th of April 2023, proclaiming that I was in the midst of taking my hunting license, despite having already gotten it. Furthermore, not reporting me for actual crimes, but instead supposedly for being strange and having social media content about the public persecution by the state and its intelligence agency, PET. And wouldn't you know it, the very same entities that are encouraging people to make these false police reports to begin with. As I showed in my first video, North Jutland Police and its district attorney of Viborg were not willing to give me FOIA access to the supposedly ongoing investigations of me, first for serious crimes and then for prevention of crimes. I have written many requests and complaints back and forth in these regards, and only as of 28th of February 2025 have the police handed over a tiny bit more information, obviously leaving out large parts of these fabricated reports, hoping that I wouldn't notice or complain, as well as leaving out 2 letters in which I'm being reported to the police, in essence for thought crimes and being the subject of a cruel and unusual social engineering experiment run by governments and intelligence agencies of multiple countries. The Danish government and police obviously don't want me to see the content of these letters, because that again would show that I'm being persecuted in a coordinated fashion with the Danish government's involvement at different levels. They're even going so far to preempt my upcoming argumentation, because of course I intend to complain over not receiving all the documents and these 2 letters. So this is just another example of how utterly desperate the Danish government and intelligence agencies have become. However, in a few of these new gotten documents, it is written on the 6th of June of 2023 that there are several random people from various organisations who are all reporting me to the police. And I'm going to fill in the blanks here. They are all from the clay shooting ranges in Hersund and Støvring. All are not so coincidentally reporting me for the same non-existing crime, i.e. referencing the government's own propagated propaganda accusations of sex crimes, notwithstanding that I have never been involved in any such cases whatsoever. And of course they are reporting me from my social media content about this persecution, without actually articulating any kind of crime whatsoever. Hence why I'm not being charged or even questioned. In fact, they don't want me anywhere near being heard, because they don't want me to be able to defend myself in any way, shape or form. The last period of time from these documents where there were a concerted effort to manufacture some kind of case against me was on January the 22nd of 2024, where we can see from these documents that the North Jutland Police started to make inquiries about me to the municipality where I live and probably elsewhere too. The police have desperately been searching for any kind of case, social cases, job centre context, anything, but they have really been grasping at straws to conjure up any kind of pretext for their supposed investigation of a non-existing crime, without having any such luck, because in actual reality they can't just solely rely on the program's mass broadcasted propaganda, in which I'm always depicted as being some kind of complete Looney Tunes, not knowing up from down, while in actual reality I'm living under the most draconian circumstances ever imaginable and functioning very well considered. So they have not been able to find anything that they can officially use against me. The last part of these documents is very telling because the police, despite many written interactions with them and the prosecutor's office and even the district attorney of Viborg in regard to my complaints regarding FOIA cases typically, I have countless of times invoked the very public situation that I find myself in, being falsely and arbitrarily accused of serious sex crimes publicly by the government itself, persecuted by the intelligence agencies publicly, using all kinds of technologies, one of which is the synthetic telepathy, to run all kinds of psychological operations on the public and coercing people to do this, that and the other, and being an unwitting and unwilling subject of a global social engineering experiment which to some extent is being broadcasted all over the world. And notwithstanding how I also, in my complaints over not receiving these specific documents earlier, have cited precisely how the Danish intelligence agency was quite obviously encouraging or inciting other random people to make the very same fake police reports, precisely as has been taking place. The police in their report in regard to their search of my social media online are framing the whole situation very, very scarcely, and only citing that I'm supposedly feeling that I'm being watched by the government and the Danish intelligence agency PET. Furthermore, leaving everything else out, they have gone out of their way to make a little note in their report in regard to my small business, One Stop Engine Shop, describing how I supposedly am calling everybody who critiques my small business a PET agent provocateur, which is specifically noteworthy because again it shows how they are going out of their way to create documents in which I'm being discredited, especially on issues where I have the easiest time of showing the government and intelligence agencies direct involvement. As it relates to my small business, the Danish intelligence agency PET routinely uses the program's real-time synthetic telepathy communication system and their social media to incite people to harass me online and to make fake complaints and reviews of my small business, typically without ever having purchased anything from my small business whatsoever. Not to mention the well-established fact that the Danish government micromanages every single sale that occurs on my small web shop, as in people are not allowed to purchase anything from me unless first receiving permission. And in regards to year 2024, the already in place prohibitions and restrictions against not only me but also the thousands of people who visit my web shop have been almost all-encompassing, something that I have documented extensively in my video called The Apartheid in Denmark Continues. Even though it appears from these very few documents that the police investigation into me for non-existing crimes didn't go any further than what I have shown than from January of 2024, it is however blatantly obvious from other police records that the Danish intelligence agency PET continue to instigate people to make fake police reports on me. For instance, on April 23rd of 2024, they had two local women in the town I live report me to the police for a serious crime that occurred on January 28th in my local town. In this instance, PET were getting these people to act as false witnesses, falsely describing both me and my car with the registration number as being involved in that home invasion. And wouldn't you have it, the very same two fake witnesses are also on the 10th of November 2024 seen on Facebook indirectly accusing me of being the shoplifter at the local store, despite there being a photo of the perpetrator. However, because the face has been blurred, they just went with it. So as you see, the names from these police reports correspond with the names highlighted from this Facebook post about the shoplifter. And to clarify, I don't know these two people from Adam, who are consistently attempting to implicate me in serious crimes. And you might ask yourself, why would they do that? The answer to that question is, of course, that these people are being cited by the government, or more specifically here in Denmark, by the Danish intelligence agency named PET, through their publicly broadcasted propaganda campaigns and psyops, using the real-time synthetic telepathy communication system as well as social media to broadcast their incitement and propaganda content. For instance, extrajudicially labeling me as some kind of heinous sex criminal. Of course, there are no charges, no indictments, no judgments, no nothing. Just an endless cycle of information warfare and propaganda, which literally can indoctrinate people on mass scale to not only hate and despise someone for no other reason than the propagated propaganda, but even get normal people to commit criminal acts, as can be seen from these last two examples. The examples that I have shown here are by no stretch of the imagination all the documents that are to be found that directly prove that there are all kinds of coordinated and malicious activities being waged against me. It's obviously just that the Danish government is not willing to give me access to this information that directly prove what I'm claiming. And that is, of course, that I'm being publicly persecuted by the state and its intelligence agencies, and the public at large to some extent, on behest of intelligence and the government, all part of this global social engineering experiment.